Oh, see, Basil's arrived. So now we're ready to go. We have Basil here. We're good. We're good for the day. Okay. So remember, we were learning about the Kabbalah of food. We all know that food plays a very important role.
Yeah, it's fun. Go in, Basil.
We all know that of the important role that food plays for the Jewish people.
Of course.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up over there, so I know that you're hearing me. Can you hear me? Anyone, give me a thumbs up. Okay.
We can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay, that's a virtual thumbs up. Okay, so we all know the important role that food plays in Judaism. We know that every Jewish holiday is, they tried to kill us, we were saved, now let's eat. The truth of the matter is that as Jews, we don't have a lot of time to enjoy our food because, holidays are a very busy time. So, you start off with Pesach, till you get to the food, to the end of the Seder, nobody's in the mood of eating anymore, right? And then on Shavuos, we're up a whole night, so we're too tired to eat. On the Rosh Hashanah, we're coming home from shul late, so we're eating food already when we're home late. Who can eat? After hearing so much gurgling in the chazan. And then on Yom Kippur, we don't eat altogether, right? The Sukkot, we have to eat outside with the bees and the cold. So we can't enjoy the food there. And Chanukah, the food's too fattening, so nobody eats it. On Purim, we're too drunk to enjoy our food. And so on and so forth. So for Jews, even though we talk a lot about our food, but Pesach food is really, this is what we were talking about last time. We spoke about matzah. Matzah is food of faith. And matzah is the food of bread of freedom. It's the food of health. But today we're going to talk about another very special food that we ate by the Seder. And that is one that's mentioned in the Manashtan, and probably on the Seder plate, it's the most prominent. So you come into a Jewish home, you look at the Seder plate, what do you see? Which is the thing which is most prominent? Is the maror, the bitter herbs. And so why are we eating all these bitter herbs? We eat it one time by maror, we eat one time by korach. I remember as a child, I was always traumatized when my father used to eat the bitter herbs. We were very religious in our house, so we had to eat a kazayas, like a whole handful of that stuff. So you take the whole handful of the bitter herbs, and then he would cough. And I think I was traumatized as a child watching my father eat the maror, but he ate it because that's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to be, to feel the bitterness of the enslavement of the Jewish people. Right? So we all know in Yiddish, what's the word for maror in Yiddish? Anybody know? The word is chrein, right? You eat always gefilte fish with chrein. Chrein is the Yiddish word for maror, for the bitter herbs. And we all know the famous story about how, in Madrid, was that one Pesach, all the plants, all the maror plants, the horseradish plants, all for whatever reason, it was a bad season. So they had to import it from the EU. They called the EU, there was nothing available. So they called Israel for some maror, for some chrein. And Israel sent a whole shipment that was going to arrive on Erev Pesach for all of Spain. And so they quickly, the rabbi and the gabbai, they all rushed to the airport. Lo and behold, when they got there, all the chrein had arrived. And but there was a strike. There was a strike of the air crews, and they all went on strike. Nobody was able to get on and off the planes, and it was already almost Yontif. So the rabbi, when he came to shul, the drashi was very sad. He didn't have any chrein, so he said the chrein of all of Spain is still on the plane. So that's the old joke. The chrein in Spain is on the plane. Anyways, that's just a little humorous thing about chrein, but we know that the bitter herbs, that's very important for us. It reminds us all the difficult and challenging times we as Jews had, not only during the Exodus from Egypt, but also he reminds us of the Holocaust and of the pogroms. And all today, as we know, is Yom HaShoah. It's a day that we remind ourselves of the 6 million Jews that were murdered cold-bloodedly by the Nazis in the Holocaust, right? Which started out already in the days of Pharaoh, when Pharaoh tried to kill all the Jewish boys. He said to cast them all in the sea. That was the first liquidation of the Jews that started back then, right? And later on, many years later, Hitler took over from Pharaoh, and he tried to kill 6 million of us. So the question is, why do we eat maror on Pesach? Why do we eat the bitter herbs on Pesach? You would think that we should avoid the bitter herbs. Let's forget about all the rotten times that we had. Let's look to the future, and the matzah reminds us a little bit of the future. So let's eat the matzah. It's the bread of affliction, but it's also the bread of freedom. It's the bread that the Jews ate when they were running out of Egypt. Why dwell on the bitter herbs? Why cough up this terrible horseradish on Pesach? Why do we need to have the chrein in Spain? Or why do we need to have chrein anywhere altogether? Let's get rid of the maror, Dayenu. We've had enough of the maror. We've had enough of the bitter herbs. Let's be involved with happy things. But this is very important. And that's why today we have the Yom HaShoah, the commemoration day of the Holocaust. If you don't remember your slavery, if you don't remember the past, if you don't remember what we went through, you can't re-experience freedom without remembering the challenges and the difficulties. But the word actually that's used for the bitter herbs is maror, which in Hebrew is mirirut. Mirirut is bitterness. Now, I want to draw a very important distinction between sadness or depression and bitterness. What's the difference? They're both more or less the same. No. There's a big difference, we're taught, between sadness and bitterness. Bitterness is like maror in the right context can be very flavorful. If you eat it with some gefilte fish, right, the bitterness can add flavor. It says that Jacob told his son, Esau, Yaakov, he wanted to have some matamim. He wanted to have some goodies, good foods. So the Alter Rebbe writes, why is it in the plural? So he said there's two kinds of good foods. There are foods that the palate enjoys. That's what sweet foods are. Sweet foods are food that don't show any resistance. In fact, they are palatable, they are enjoyable. Like when you eat a candy or ice cream or something that's sweet, that is an enjoyable food. But there's another kind of joy in eating. That is the joy that comes from a sharp food or a spicy food, Like there are many foods, especially the Israelis, they love a little hot pepper, right? They like a little something sharp. So they ask, well, how can you enjoy something hot or spicy well, in the right context, it opens up the taste buds. It's like challenging to the taste buds. So you enjoy the challenge that comes from it. And the same thing as Jews, we don't look at our past as sad. We look at it as bitter. Bitter means that we were able to take those bad experiences, and as a people, we were able to transform it. The Holocaust was totally tragic, totally sad. But at the same time, survivors were able to take those experiences, and with those experiences, they rebuilt the Jewish people stronger and better than ever before. The survivors that came to Israel and built up Israel, where did they get that strength from? Part of it was the bitterness, the difficulties, the challenges they had before, and they promised never again. And what did they do with that never again feeling? They went and they built Israel. So as Jews, we never view anything that happens in our life as a coincidence, as happenstance, as something that just happened. No. If something happens to you in your life, you take that experience and you use it as a growth opportunity. So that's why it's called maror. It's not called sad, it's called bitter. Bitter is like, it's rough, it's tough, it's challenging, but we use it as a springboard. It's like diving. When you dive into the swimming pool, you don't just jump into it, you go on a diving board. What's a diving? A diving board, you depress the board back, you move it back, and you create a springboard that you should be able to be catapulted much farther than you would have reached had you not had that depression, had you not had that going down on the diving board. So you use your down, your step back in order to take 2 steps forward. And that's the strength. You could say, what is the strength of the Jewish people? More than any other people in the world. You know, this year the Jewish people won an award. They just came out with a study, and they said that the people that have had the most hate incidents of this year are the Jewish people. So we're always the best. We're always on top. We had the most hate incidents, 2022. I think things would get a little better. We've had the most hate incidents of any people proportionate to their size was to the Jewish people this year. But as Jews, we don't sulk. We take that experience and we make maror out of it. Maror is that sharpness that we use to make ourselves better and greater. You know, that is what the maror experience is. Now, the Jewish people, you know, one of the questions we ask is, why is this night different than all the other nights of the rest of the year? And one of the questions is about maror. Why the whole year we eat all kinds of herbs, but on the night of Pesach we eat bitter herbs. Now, what's the answer? You know, we all know the question. But what's the answer? The answer is we were slaves in Egypt. We came out, Hashem, and this is what has helped us and has given us greater strength. And I have a great uncle, Oliver Shalom, that became a knight. He was knighted. He was by the Queen of England. His name was Rabbi Sudak. I mean, he got a full knighthood, but he got a certain degree of knighthood. And you know, when the Queen came up to give him the blessing for becoming the knight, so she sees a rabbi with a long beard. She asked the question. She asked the people standing around, and she says, "Why is this night different than all the other nights of the rest of the year?" So this is what the Jews, our story is. Why is this night? Why? Hashem had a plan for the Jewish people that we should take those challenges, take the maror in our life and use it out for positivity. Many of us have maror. We all have a little, what you call a pekale. We all have some difficult challenges in our life. We all experience some form of maror in our lives. But that's why the Jews, we eat maror to remind ourselves how we need to view the maror, the bitter herbs of our life, and turn it around. You know, Steven Spielberg was very, very much a very famous, he is still a famous director of all kinds of movies. But one of his most famous movies was a film called Schindlers List. And we mentioned before, we had the opportunity with the group that we were on. I think Kim Cohen is on this the group. She was there with me. And I remember there when we stood by the place of Schindler's List, we davened mincha in front of the factory of Schindler's List. But Steven Spielberg said, what inspired him to make a film, probably the most famous film about the Holocaust, the Schindler's List? Very accurate. What inspired him to do it? So he tells a story that he had a neighbor, an old survivor from the Holocaust, that was his next door neighbor when he grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. His next door neighbor was an old man who was a Holocaust survivor. And when he was a little boy, he got close to this old man. And this old man loved him very much. I don't know if he had his own children, but he really loved Stephen. And whenever Stephen went to school or came back, he would always ask him about how his day was and what did he learn. Did he learn some English, some math, some Torah, whatever he learned in those days. And then when he got a little older and he was learning the numbers and learning a little bit math, so this old man, this Holocaust survivor, he had his arm. He was from Auschwitz. So he had all the numbers tattooed. As the Nazis, we know, they would keep records of every single Jew in the concentration camps. And they would brandish a number, to make the Jews like numbers, to make us, that was part of their demoralizing, humiliating approach to turn us into just numbers, not human beings, right? So that they put a number on all the people. So this old man who lived next door to Steven Spielberg, he had his arm that had all the numbers. So he would, when Stephen was learning the numbers, so the old man would say, "Oh, you're learning the numbers? Okay, what's this number? And what's that number?" He went through all the numbers that were on his arm. He'd say, "What's that number? What's that number?" Right? And then he remembers, he used to show him the 6 was one of his numbers, 6. He showed him the number 6. Stephen would answer, "Yes, the number 6. Now," he says, "Now what happens if I turn my arm over? What number do you see now?" Stephen would say, "Number 9. So he would then, and later on, a little older, he would teach him math on that. He'd say, "How much is 6 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1? And I'd go through a whole thing and he'd do subtraction and multiplication, division, all from those numbers that he had on his arm. So Stephen was so impressed with this old man, how he was able to take the symbol of degradation, of humiliation, of turning us into subhumans, those numbers on his arm. So most other people would be embarrassed. And this guy, for him, it was a badge of honor. Not only was it a badge of honor for this old man, but he turned it into an educational tool. I mean, that's brilliant. So Spielberg was so moved by this guy, he promised that he was going to make some special movie in honor of these Holocaust survivors and to tell their story. And so, because that's what maror is. Maror is you have a bad experience, but then you turn it into a good food. The Jews, we eat maror with gefilte fish, right? We turn the negative experiences into a positive tool, like this old man with Spielberg. And I always love that story because it really brings home the Jewish approach. It's not sadness, it's challenges, it's bitterness. You turn the bitterness into a spice. You turn it into a positive springboard for the future. Like I said, today is Holocaust Remembrance Day, so I'm telling you stories of the Holocaust. A similar story that I can share with you is an old man who lives now in Crown Heights. He must be, close to 90 years old. And he's close to 90 years old, and he was one of the experiments of Dr. Mendel. He's a rabbi. His name is Rabbi Mendel. And he came, face to face with Dr. Mendel, who was the angel of death, he was called. the angel of death, because he was one of the youngest survivors of the Holocaust. He might be in his 80s. Not even 90 yet. 85 or something. He was one of the youngest survivors of the Holocaust, and so he dealt with Dr. Mengele. And many years later, he tells a story that he went shopping in the Lower East Side. And so the Rabbi Mendel, not Mengele, it's funny, his name is Mengel, and the other guy is Mengele. Mengel versus Mengele, right? So he survived the Holocaust miraculously. And many years later, he was living in Brooklyn. And he, give me a second here. He was in Brooklyn, and he went shopping. In those days, if you wanted to get a good bargain, you would go to the Lower East Side. I don't know if anyone here has been to Manhattan, to the Lower East Side, but that used to be the place you wanted to go. You went to Orchard Street, and you'd buy over there like some shirts, cheapest price, whatever. And whenever we went to camp, we always went to the Lower East Side, and we go do our shopping there because everything was a bargain, everything was a mitzvah, and you always can negotiate. So it was a Friday afternoon, and Rabbi Mendel went to go shopping in the Lower East Side, and he's running home because it's almost Shabbos. He quickly got to go get the subway. He's running down Orchard Street. There's an old man, a Jewish old man, is sitting in front of his store selling his wares. And the old man asks Rabbi Mendel, "Who lives to? Where are you running?" She says, I have to make it home. It's late already. It's almost Shabbos. I'm going to the subway to get the subway to make it back to Brooklyn. It's late. So the old man says, I used to keep that Shabbos thing. I can't keep it anymore, he said. So I used to keep it in the olden days. But after this, pulls up his arm. You see this over here? Show his arm. The old man says to Rabbi Mendel, to Rabbi Mendel, he says to him, I can't keep Shabbos after what God did to us in the Holocaust, what we lived through. I gave it all up. But he didn't realize that Rabbi Mendel is also a Holocaust survivor. So Rabbi Mendel says, well, everybody reacts to things differently. He says, I want to tell you my story, Rabbi Mendel says, and he rolls up his arm and he shows it to the old man. And he says, I'm also a survivor of Auschwitz. And after God saved me from the Holocaust, I could never give up Shabbos. So it's like a different approach to the same experience, right? This guy rejected God, and Rabbi Mendel embraced God. In fact, not only embraced God, but he became more religious, and he became more involved. He raised a beautiful family with many children that I know personally. He said, after the Holocaust, after this, the army shows him the same numbers. He says, by me is the opposite. And the old man gave a krechts. He said, I hear you. He was surprised. He was surprised to see that this rabbi had the same numbers on his arm. Rabbi Mendel says the next time he came back, he wanted to find the old man. The old man was gone. He wasn't there in the store. But the point I'm trying to make is that sometimes, these negative experiences that we have in life, we're given a choice. Either we can use it as a tool of rejecting life, or we can use these negative experiences and say, okay, let's not do less, let's do more. We don't stand in judgment of anyone because, whoever lived through the Holocaust, my apologies to anyone. There's nothing I could say to anyone that lived through the Holocaust. If they rejected the religion, God will have to deal with them, as we say. But nonetheless, I'm just bringing out the point that these negative experiences in life, we can either And in the language of Viktor Frankl, he says that Viktor Frankl is a famous psychiatrist who lived through the Holocaust, and he wrote a whole philosophy called logotherapy. And in his philosophy, he bases it on his experiences in the Holocaust. If you ever want to read a very good book, it's called In Search of Meaning. And this is a fantastic book. He writes his story of living through the Holocaust, Viktor Frankl, and then he develops a revolutionary approach to human psychology. About he speaks about how the people that lived through the Holocaust, there were two kinds of people. There were some that rejected, and there were others that embraced life even more. And the secret was those that believed in a meaning of life and had a purpose to live, they were able to survive the Holocaust. And he gives this idea for people who are living through cancer or anything else, that the most important thing is to have a goal and to have a purpose in life. And that is the key to survival. But in that book, he also writes about two kinds of people. One kind of person is a victim of the circumstances, and the other one is a victor. His name was Viktor Frankl, by the way. A victim or a victor? That's our choice. And the Jews, we say, maror, take the maror and dip it in the sweet stuff, in the charoset. It's sweet, right? Take out use the sharpness and transform it into something sweet. That's what many people who lived through the Holocaust were able to do. And they were able to teach their family and their children to continue on that path. Like I said, I can't judge anyone, but I know this is the Jewish way. It's clear that this has always been the Jewish way, not to sulk, not to become depressed, but to transform those experiences into positive ones. You know, Elie Wiesel, another very, very famous Holocaust survivor. So he shares the story. I'm not sure if he was witness to it or he just heard the story, that in Auschwitz or in some of the other camps, I'm not sure which camp it was at, the story, but it was in one of the camps. The people were in the bunker together, and they were totally mad. They were angry. How could God do this to us? So they did something which was totally radical. But then again, you know, when people live through these things, you can't be angry at them. They did something totally radical. They decided they're going to bring God, so to speak, to a din Torah, to a court case. Which is, to bring the Lord, to bring Hashem, to bring him to court. And what were they bringing him to court for? For breaking the covenant with Israel. Because God said to the Jewish people, if you will follow my ways, you do what you're supposed to, I will give you a rain on time, I will take care of you, and I'll bring you to the Holy Land. And so they were very, very upset. Look what was happening. Hitler was murdering all these Jewish people. Where's the justice? Decided to bring God to a court case. How did they do it? They had a few judges, and they put them as the judges, and they had a few lawyers and prosecutors. These were famous Jews, all of them. Some lawyers and prosecutors, and they made the lawyers defended God, and the prosecutors were going to prosecute God, so to speak. They made this big court case, big court case. It was like amongst 20, 30 people in the bunker. It was late at night. It was late, as I was during the day. I don't know. It sounds like during the day. During the day, they were all there. I think it was when there was a lot of Polish Jews in there. Hungarian Jews also came there. They were arrived then from Hungary, so they were put into the room there. And they're all there together, and they're going through this court case. And the prosecutor says the case against God, and then the lawyers try to defend God. The prosecutors come back, and the judges are listening. Then the judges say the case is over, and they go to deliberation. They deliberate the case for a couple of hours. They come out with the verdict. What's the verdict? come out and they say, as much as we try to defend God, we find the Holy One, blessed be He, guilty of breaking the covenant with Israel. Everybody, imagine, heresy, everyone blown over. And then the head judge that announced the case, he says, okay, bang on the table. He says, and now we're going to pray the afternoon service, the mincha service, all together. So, despite the fact that they found God guilty, they went and they prayed mincha afterwards. One thing had nothing to do with the other. They didn't say, okay, God's guilty, so we're free. We don't have to do anything. No, on the contrary. Right after that, they went and they davened mincha. Their relationship with God didn't become weaker, it became stronger. They used the negative experiences to reaffirm their belief and their trust in God, even though they didn't understand a lot of things. And you can imagine when you're sitting in Auschwitz, it's very hard to have faith and belief. But they did it. They were able to, in the Holocaust itself, they were able to go and daven mincha. There's actually a nice movie somewhere out there. I don't know, it's called The Trial or The Verdict. I can find out the name for you. It's this case that was made against God. It's a documentary. It's a documentary with actors. Actors. I think they're English actors. Really good movie. If you want to waste some time or spend some good time, watch the movie. But this is the Jewish story. We take the numbers on Spielberg's arm, on his neighbor's arm, and make a movie out of it, teach education. Rabbi Mendel raises a family and becomes stronger Jews. The Jews in the Holocaust, they transform the experience and they go and daven mincha. This is the story of the Jewish people. Maror, yes, maror. It's bitter. My father's face turned red, purple from eating it, but it was a lesson to the kids, to the family. We need to re-experience that and then go afterwards and become better people, stronger people, and more committed to the Jewish people, to Israel. That's how Jews deal with anti-Semitism. That's how we deal with all the challenges that we have in life. We take the maror and we dip it into the charoset. Well, like I said before, that Jacob asked for two kinds of food. He said, give me a sweet food, but also give me a sharp food. And he was really passing on the message for the generation. There'll be many generations of times that you'll eat the sweet foods, but then there'll be times you'll eat the sharp foods. But make sure that they're tasty. And you're going to use that oomph. When you eat a sharp food, it's not from the taste itself that you enjoy the challenge of it, right? The hot pepper, throw another hot pepper in, those that like spicy foods, they know what this means. So we Jews, we've had a lot of spicy food. We've had generations of maror, but we've also had generations of becoming a people who have taken those experiences and transformed it into something positive. So here you go. Any questions on maror and bitter herbs or whatever?
Rabbi, excuse me. I apologize. We were a little bit late because we were watching the live presentation from Auschwitz-Birkenau.
I know that, right?
And we were watching, and all along I was hoping that it will end because we didn't want to miss your class. And almost at the end, there was a 96-year-old Holocaust survivor who was speaking about his experience. And I was trying to connect with the food because I was already thinking about our lesson. And he was saying when they came and his mother was given something to eat and he said, this is trefe. I'm not going to eat that. Right. And the next day she was gassed. So now he had this dilemma, should I eat trefe or I shouldn't? Right. That was one. And if I may second, when you were talking about the number, our parents were in a concentration camp. And when my mother-in-law was in North York General Hospital. I was with her most of the time, so I can help out. And one of the nurses, when she was changing her, she noticed the number, and she said, "Oh, you are such a modern Bobby, because you have your boyfriend's phone number here tattooed."
It's just,
And my mother-in-law, we were breathless.
yeah.
So then I organized, with the help of the nurses and the doctors, that they had a lesson.
Yeah.
How to treat, this is a Jewish area. This is not a first and last patient. Right. So I'm sorry to talk too much. Sorry, I apologize.
There's a lot, unfortunately, there's a lot of ignorance out there. That's what it is. It's ignorant, you know. Yeah. People, imagine people don't know that, you know what I mean? Anyways, Hashem should bless us all, that we should use out the numbers. And actually, the what she said was that it's a phone number. It's a direct line to Hashem. You know, that's what they have on the thing. It's their phone number. The survivors, when they come up there to heaven, they just show the phone number. Okay, you go right to heaven because you've lived through so much. So maybe she was onto something, even though she was ignorant. But that was a phone number. Anyways, thank you all for joining us. And
thank you, Rabbi.
A good Erev Shabbos, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow on the Shabbos program.
We missed you.
Thank you.
Last week because of the holiday.
So we'll be back this week in Mitzvah Shem. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.